Hello, hello. This video is about depression and mental health. So it may not be right for you if you're going to be triggered if you suffer from any kind of mental health issues. If so, skip it and enjoy the lighter ones on this channel. If not, and you do enjoy it, please consider liking and subscribing and sharing. Thank you and see ya. I have been recently diagnosed with depression that wavers between severe and moderate, depending on how many triggers I'm exposed to and the kind of medication that I'm going on. And when I coupled the medication with some trauma based therapy, I uncovered the fact that I have had chronic depression since I was at least 9 years old. Why am I saying this? For two main reasons. The first one has to do with how people sometimes look at kids that are more quiet or more timid or more, they call them introverted, but it's not just, it sometimes is more than that. And these have been the labels that I have heard growing up. I'm now 40 years old, 40. And as a young kid, I have heard things like, you're too shy, or you're not confident enough. Why don't you go and play with kids? Why won't you do that or do this and join this activity or that? And it always seemed like I was being put into this category of being just antisocial or just plain not fun to be around or just, acting up or something like that. And nobody ever explored, neither my family nor anybody of their friends or family ever mentioned depression or tried to explore depression. In my case, as a child, it wasn't on the horizon. I don't remember it being on the horizon. I could be mistaken, but I don't think we ever explored it medically. Okay. And this is not to blame anybody, definitely not my parents. The awareness back then of mental health was just not that good. I was born in the early 80s. People were not as versed now as they are now in what mental health issues look like, okay? And especially if they're talking about a 9-year-old kid or a 7-year-old kid. That's one thing. And I feel a lot of us struggle because in this generation, not so much maybe the generation Z, like my daughter's age. And I made it a point that my daughter understands that she can have anxiety and she's allowed to express her feelings and that it's legitimate and it's not because she's acting up. But a lot of us who were born in that 80s generation or a little bit earlier, a little bit later, definitely those who have, who were born earlier understand that you have a bunch of labels that you grew up hearing about yourself, that you're not fun, you're generally just grumpy, you're just too shy, you're not gregarious, you're not outgoing enough, and that is a bad thing in general, and you need to adjust that without going into the root cause of why somebody seems withdrawn, and that it could be because something happened in the brain of that child that changed it and made them depressed. And they've carried that weight all their life, thinking that they just need to keep pretending to be outgoing and fun and jokey because that's how people get to like them. And they can't really show just how sad they are because that's not good enough. That has been my story. I have been exposed as a child, I think I was about 6 or 7, to a very traumatic event. I will not go into detail about it in this video, but perhaps at some point in the future. But basically, what happened was it changed me. I really seriously changed from this very outspoken and loud and outgoing child to a very withdrawn and sad and timid kind of child. And I remember it being a very sudden shift. Um, and I was lucky enough to get the diagnosis recently after having resisted for a long time to go to therapy, and resisted for an even longer time to try medication for depression, thinking that, oh my God, I will be on antidepressants my whole life if I get used to it, and there will be no way out of that. But then I realized, oh my God, people who have diabetes never think about, and never get told even that, you're going to be on insulin all your life or diabetic medication all your life. So why don't you just try and snap out of it and tough it through and, toughen it out and that kind of thing. So why should I, when I have something that is defined as an illness, think that way? My illness is just as serious as diabetes. It really is. It's no less, just because it's not visible and not very tangible. Doesn't make it less of a serious illness. It really is. In fact, it is the number one cause worldwide why people take time off. It actually is depression. It's not diabetes. It's not heart problems. It's actually depression. Um, so, what I'm thinking is, one, medication helps. Two, it's not because you're a stick in the mud or a party pooper. It's because you're depressed. And don't let people put the blame on you. Don't let them label you as someone who's just not fun to be around. If you're depressed, you're depressed. That's legit. The other thing I want to talk about, and that brings me to a more systemic point. I don't feel that I have enough support where I live for my condition. I live in the province of Nova Scotia in Canada, and we have a health care crisis. And I've been thinking a lot about this crisis, and I'm coming to the conclusion that it could be manufactured. I think the crisis is manufactured. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is just the fact that 1 plus 1 is not equaling 2 right here. The math is not mathing, it's not adding up. We've got a bunch of qualified healthcare professionals coming into the province, coming into the country every single year. And yet, the crisis that started years and years ago is just not getting better. It's not, and some of you might be thinking, okay, but with those professionals that are immigrating into Canada, we get sick people too who are immigrating into Canada. But here's the thing: the federal program that does the final approval on immigrant applications will eliminate, there is a very extensive medical checkup that you have to go through when you apply for immigration. I know this because I'm a first generation immigrant from Egypt, and I've gone through this. You cannot pass, you cannot go through immigration all the way through to the final step and actually land as an immigrant without having gone through that extensive medical checkup. And it's real. It will weed out people who are sick. So we don't have that many sick people coming and immigrating here. But we do have the professionals coming in every year who have experience, who have practiced healthcare for years and years in their own countries. So what's going on? Why is there still a crisis? I've looked at the ins and outs of this, and I'm coming to the conclusion that maybe it's manufactured because there is a law or two somewhere. I'm not a legal expert, and I'm by no means a medical expert, but I understand from my friends who have gone through the process of getting a medical equivalency here to practice their medical degree or their healthcare their healthcare expertise. They can't practice without a very almost limiting kind of exam or a bunch of exams. It's quite limiting. The way they describe it is that the majority of people who apply to the equivalency exams here will not pass. And I don't think that's because Canadian standards are the best standards anywhere. I think They might be, but I just don't think it's because we have these standards that are completely immensely just up there, where everybody else is out of league. It doesn't add up. I think it's because something with the exam, something with the equivalency circumstance where people go through about 4 years, if they're lucky, sometimes more, to get through to practicing with their medical license. I think something is limiting the number of people that actually finish that licensing and equivalency process. And it might all add up to how many doctors are are allowed to actually exist in the medical profession in Nova Scotia, so that their rates continue to be very high. And so it, for me, boils down to the economics and the dollar value of the doctors that are already existing. So I don't think there's a real shortage in the supply of doctors and healthcare professionals. I think there is a systemic manufactured issue in the equivalency process by which medical professionals from elsewhere um, can get to practice medicine in Canada. Um, I want this to be addressed. I want this to be addressed not just for me. I have difficulty getting connected to a psychiatrist, although I need a psychiatrist. I really do. Um, I know of people who have died in emergency departments in Nova Scotia. I know of people who've had their cancers go from stage 1 to stage 4 because of how late they got their treatment. And there are so many stories like that. And I think that there is a solution to these problems. I think because the issue of shortage is a manufactured one, I think it could be really easy to break it down and to make it an issue no longer. I just really hope our policymakers can heed that. It could be as easy as a policy change, it could be as easy as enacting some kind of emergency practice or process to resolve the crisis. I know it's got nuance and complexities, but I don't think it's acceptable to be not doing anything for the short term. There is a fire that's burning, and we need to really see. I'm forgetting words because of my condition. It's hard for me to focus on things like that because they trigger me. So yeah, it's a fire that's burning as urgent as the fire that was in the woods a few months ago, and some very short term, very immediate responses need to be taken.